From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we start our preview of the Broncos and New York Jets, a pivotal game for the Broncos. The New York Jets, of course, are undefeated on the road, playing really, really good football. Good running game, good defense, and Zach Wilson is making just enough plays. Also good special teams, by the way. They made some big plays against Green Bay. So we'll preview a little bit of that, but I want to start here first, Ben. You put this out on your Twitter account, at Allbright NFL, sort of a quarter-by-quarter breakdown of the offense and the defense for the Broncos. And I think there's, again, if you watch the games, you probably know most of this, but it's a little bit surprising to see there are some things about the offense, we'll start there, that are actually working.
Well, the script. The Broncos are 14th in the NFL in first quarter scoring. That's slightly above average. That's telling you that the script is probably working. The problem is that when you look at the rest of the per quarter numbers, they're pretty bad. It's 25th on second down, worst in the league, 32nd on the third quarter. And by the way, the only team in the league averaging less than a point per quarter in the third quarter.
Wow. 5
total points, 2 of which came on defense on a safety. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And then, of course, you get to the fourth quarter, 23rd, and you get the kind of situation where you're catching up and you're playing catch up on some of that stuff, and so you get the Russell Wilson explosive play or whatever. And but it's not really it's not meaningful, I don't think, in the long term. The 23rd is a bit of a bump from 32nd because there's nowhere to go but up from there. But it's not something that's like, hey, they're having a significant improvement in the fourth quarter.
But the point is here for the Broncos, let's just say they were around league average offensively, 14th in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. If you could somehow replicate any of that, and I know you have your idea about how to do that, if you could replicate any of that coming into the second half, this team would be a team with a winning record right now. I mean, the margins have been really that close. 2 overtime losses, both by 3 points. They weren't trailing at any point in regulation. So you just take those 2 games, for example. If the Broncos would have put up top 14 or even just around middle of the pack offense, they would have won those games handily.
They might be undefeated, actually, if that were the case. Even just middle of the pack scoring. If you're getting 21 points a game, they're probably undefeated at this point. The Raiders game, a little bit different.
Yeah.
But, it's, you go back and you look at what this defense has been able to do. The Broncos, except for 5 minutes and 47 seconds of the Raiders game, have been within the 10 and 90% probability to win margin. They've been blown out or not been out, out in front. So they've been within the margin of error for all but 5 minutes and 47 seconds of game time for the season.
Yeah, I think if you take a second step back, and I know the frustration is palpable with Broncos fans, so I'm not telling you how to feel about this team. Certainly we have our frustrations, but if you take a step back and take maybe some of the expectations you had from the preseason out a little bit, you'd recognize that by some of the numbers, or at least by how some of the game flow has gone, the Broncos have been right there. It really does test the whole point about would you rather lose big or lose close, because I feel like the close losses have been more excruciating for Broncos fans than almost ever before.
Well, right. If you lose big, like, for instance, the Buffalo preseason game, you just, you're up, you're punching out of your weight class. But Broncos have been in every game this season. And that's the thing. It's like, well, this team should be competitive. It should be winning football games. And it looks like we're in the lose small instead of win small phase, which we had hoped to be. We'd hoped to be in the win small to win big phase, and we're actually in the lose small phase. And so that's kind of troubling. That means that this team is further back than people had anticipated. There was a lot of preseason hype on the offense because of Russ and Hackett and all that kind of stuff, but they're in the crawl phase of crawl, walk, run. And how do you get out of that? Well, if you're good on the script, why don't you script the second half? Why don't you script the 10-play script for the second half as well? Mm-hmm. Get yourself out of the funk, because obviously Nathaniel Hackett subscribes to the middle 8 theory, which is win the last 4, win the first 4 of the first half, second half, win those minutes, and you got a chance to win a football game. Then you could see that by the way you use timeouts. So if you subscribe to that win the middle 8 theory, then you've got to have some kind of offensive output in that. And so what they need to do is 2 scripts, a 15-play script to start the game and a 10-play script to start the second half. And you need to be practicing that out every day. And if you've got that script to start the second half, and it doesn't have to be complicated, you can repeat plays from the first script. But if you're doing something like that, then you're more proficient on those practice plays. Your offense is kind of confident because they know what's coming next. They know what they're supposed to do, and they know how to execute it. There's not a wait around to see, okay, what was the. So I feel like that Nathaniel Hackett, if the script is working, why not do a mini script when you get the ball in the second half to get out there and score some points.
Yeah, I love that. And I imagine there are going to be some people listening to that saying, okay, well, shouldn't they be further ahead than that? Well, I mean, you'd love to be, but let's deal with reality.
Yeah, we're dealing with where we are. Obviously, we'd love to be ahead of that. We'd love to be at this point where it's firing on all cylinders and we're going to put up Peyton Manning Star Wars numbers.
Yep.
But they aren't.
But they just aren't.
So you are what you are. And rather than be in denial about that, accept that and figure out ways to make it better.
Okay, let's go to the defensive side of the ball because these are obviously much more positive numbers when it comes to what their scoring by quarter is, but it does show a little bit of a pattern for the Broncos defense that they do get off to a bit of a slow start.
Yeah, actually, the Broncos, in terms of first quarter scoring allowed, only 10th and 15th in the second quarter, actually. Now, part of that has to do with the Seahawks, the Geno Smith thing.
Sure.
That a lot of points were scored in there. But 10th and 15th, so, above average to average in the first and second quarter. But it's after halftime that this team really starts coming into their own. In the third quarter, the Denver Broncos are fourth in scoring allowed, in the fourth quarter, fifth. So they are a top five defense in the second half. They make the slight adjustments at the half, and then they are able to shut you down. The problem is the offense has not been able to take advantage of the fact that the defense has shut them down.
Right. So just very quickly on that. So, yeah, the offense has not been able to take advantage of, but the defense is doing this without the complementary play of the offense.
Right.
They're on the field for a ridiculous amount of plays, and yet they're able to be top 5 or top 4 in those quarters in scoring without the complement of the offense.
They're getting better as they're getting tired.
Which is
remarkable. That almost never happens. This is a league that's heavily tilted to the offensive play. So for a defense to be getting even better as they're getting it, we saw that. Look at how the Broncos should have gone for it on 4th and 1 in the first possession of overtime and chose elected to punt it. They had so much confidence in their defense. That defense, by the way, was on the field for something like 95 plays. They were still shutting people down at points, in the fourth quarter and finding ways, and in the overtime, and finding ways to get the ball back. And if it hadn't been for a special teams muff punt, the offense might have been on the field to take the game-winning drive.
No, it's remarkable. Well, and again, it's that those close margins, right? The offense would have been back on the field. Who knows if they can string together a couple of plays? They were able to against the Colts, get down into scoring range. Same deal against the Colts. You're 4th and 1. You make the decision to pass there. Maybe you decide to run. And so maybe those are some things that you got to learn during this process. All right. Good stuff there, Ben. Let's talk a little bit about the Jets coming into town. Now, I'll start by saying it is highlighted by their youth. They have some really talented young players. Breece Hall looks tremendous. A little bit of a tip of the cap to you. I was not the biggest Sauce Gardner guy coming out of college, but he looks every bit like a number 1 CB in this league. Quinnen Williams was Defensive Player of the Week. He is absolutely wrecking shop. So they've got a lot of youth. They've got a lot of young players, and it's one of those deals where sometimes when teams kind of pop like this with all that youth, they say, well, you're probably a little early from where you're being. But the thing is, you also don't know really what it's like to be anything other than that. They've seen loss, right? They know what it's like to lose, but the other time is when you start to win, it just becomes a little bit like an avalanche, right? It just sort of cascades on itself. So what do you see when you watch the Jets?
I see a young football team that has a lot of confidence in itself. The passing game hasn't exactly come together the way they want to yet, but the run game has been strong, particularly with Breece Hall. Michael Carter's more of a complimentary guy, hasn't been quite as effective as Breece Hall's been. Zach Wilson, they do all kinds of different things with him. He has thrown for, caught, and rushed for touchdowns this year. Garrett Wilson's the guy they target the most, and he's been pretty reliable on that. Corey Davis is more of the deep threat kind of guy, the big play kind of guy. They do love to go to Breece Hall in the pass game as well, and Tyler Conklin gets heavily involved. So
they have Elijah Moore there too.
They do.
You didn't even get a target this last week. Because they didn't really need it, even though he's a dynamic player too.
They do, and they spread it around. Like it's not like they focused on any one guy they're force feeding. They spread it around, just whoever's open. Braxton Berrios gets in there for some trick gadget type stuff as well. So that's always fun and interesting. They are not afraid to do trick plays. Punter and Berrios have both thrown passes. So Zach Wilson does have some movement with his legs too. He hasn't really been much of a rusher this year because of the injury and kind of this stuff. But when he gets free, he can run, and he has a big arm. People don't think of Zach Wilson as having a cannon. He's got a big arm. So you got to watch out for that. He'll threaten you at every level of the field.
Yeah, and they've had some decent passing numbers, some decent rushing numbers. A couple of things that stand out to me. First of all, they're not always successful staying on the field. The third down percentage is pretty low. Mm-hmm. But then when they get to the red zone, because of that good running game, we've seen that with teams that have a good running game, they tend to close out. They're one of the top teams in the league, as it turns out, in closing on the red zone. On the defensive side of the ball, it's a good defense, but also, again, they have been susceptible to scores in the red zone. I wonder, though, because of the recent trends, and you watch how dominant they were against Green Bay. Now, Green Bay's had their own problems, so it's not to say, well, the Green Bay that we always remember them to be. But to watch some of their recent plays, they don't ever blink. That's the one thing I'll give them credit for. For a young team, they hung in there. That Cleveland win that they had, where they had to just sort of they shouldn't have won that game. Like by a many accounts, They should not have won that game. But they found a way to sort of stay in it. So the Broncos, I think a lot of people thought this game would be a Broncos win coming into the preseason before everything happened. But this just goes to show you with the NFL, things change very quickly. It
does. And if you're the Broncos, you've got to find a way to take Quinton Williams out of the game because he sets everybody else up very well. They've got a lot of guys who can get after you in the front four with the sacks. But Quinton sets it all up. On the back end, they'll debate you to turnovers. The big strength of this defense is how they intercept you. And LaMarcus Joyner likes to play that robber zone. They play a lot of cover three. You're going to have to watch and make sure that he's not lurking there in that zone over the middle to take the ball away. Now, to be fair, Russ doesn't really throw the ball there that often, so that kind of helps out a little bit. But LaMarcus Joyner does like to lurk in that robber zone, and he will intercept you.
Yeah, they got 7 interceptions so far in the year. And I know the Broncos are another team that they're going to try to bolster that number. And Zach Wilson, at least historically, has been problematic when it comes to turnovers. So it sort of feels like a lot of average kind of conversation where you say inevitably these players won't be able to play to this level. But again, while they're still playing at this level, I'm sure they're looking at the Broncos, who look like a bit of a wounded duck right now, and saying, hey, this is just one more team that we can maybe get over on. But maybe, just maybe, the Broncos are set to surprise, especially because they have been so bad on the offense. It was the point that you made earlier. From the third quarter to the fourth quarter, you had nowhere to go but up. So I think for the Broncos offense, that's got to be a bit of the feeling. Guys, this is the worst we're going to play this whole year. We have nowhere to go but up. We've got to find a way to get over 16 points. We've got to find a way to push this and give our defense an opportunity to really play at the possibility. Because the thing about it is the defense is putting up all these numbers, and they're doing it without the benefit of a real lead. Now, they are playing maybe even or close to even, but when you're only up by 3 points, it's not really a lead. You need to have at least 7 to 10 points to really see what this defense is capable of. And I think the interception numbers will start to come for the Broncos, who are already the number one team in the league with forced fumbles.
They are. And they need to generate and get more turnovers. Just forcing the fumble isn't enough. You got to recover them, and that's sort of been a problem for this team. If the ball starts bouncing their way, look out.
All right. Fun preview. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.